Hey, my friend, thanks for staying with me until the end. Deep attachment doesn't always speak out loud. It stays in the way someone pays attention to you, cares for you, chooses to be present, and remains loyal even in silence. If you've noticed these signs, trust what you feel. Someone who truly values you will always find a way to show it, even when words don't come easily. Here's my sincere advice to you. Don't ignore your emotions and don't rush to doubt them. Your feelings matter, and recognizing them is the first step to understanding real human connection. When you see genuine care, respect it, protect it, and also ask yourself, are you giving the same honesty and presence in return? That's how deep bonds grow and last. Sign 1. They remember the smallest details about you. Sign 1 is quieter than a love confession, but sharper than a grand gesture. They remember the tiny things about you, the throwaway lines you barely remember saying. There's a moment most men overlook because it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like a soft tap on the shoulder. You mentioned something once, casually, almost lazily. A preference, a childhood story, the kind of coffee you can't stand, the one song that calms you down, the weird way you hate your socks feeling twisted inside your shoes. You don't make a big deal out of it. You don't repeat it. You don't even think it mattered. And then weeks later, sometimes months later, they bring it up like it's obvious, like it's always been part of the world. Not to show off, not to score points, not to trap you in some gotcha moment. Just naturally, like your details belong in their mind the way their own do. And you catch yourself pausing, half amused, half stunned, thinking, how did you remember that? That is the tell. That is the fingerprint of attachment. Not loud, not pushy, not desperate, just steady. Psychology says memory is not a simple filing cabinet. It's a bouncer at a private club. Most information doesn't get in. Most conversations fade fast. Names, dates, random facts gone. The brain is selective because it must be. It prioritizes what feels meaningful, what feels emotionally relevant, what feels connected to safety and belonging. So when someone consistently remembers your smallest details, it's rarely an accident. It's the brain quietly labeling you as important. And this is where the psychology tricks show up, not as manipulation, but as a window into how humans bond. The mind stores what the heart highlights. You might tell yourself, they're just a good listener. Be careful with that. Listening can be polite. Listening can be professional. Listening can be temporary. Attachment is different. Attachment turns attention into retention. Attachment makes the brain tag you with emotional weight, not logical weight. Emotional weight means you're not just interesting, you're relevant. You matter. In the simplest terms, if you don't matter, the detail doesn't stick. If you matter, the detail sinks in and stays there. Don't confuse basic courtesy with emotional investment. Courtesy remembers your name. Investment remembers your patterns. They don't just remember what you said, they remember how you said it. They remember you get quieter when you're tired, not because you're mad, but because your battery runs low. They remember you joke when something hits too close, like humor is your little shield. They remember you smile a certain way when you're pretending something didn't sting. That is not mind reading. That is careful noticing. That is someone's brain building a map of you because it wants to stay close to you. And if you're a man between 35 and 70, you've probably learned to respect what's consistent more than what's flashy. You've seen enough promises. You've heard enough speeches. Consistency is the rare currency. This is why small remembrance is so powerful. It's not romantic poetry. It's practical devotion. It says, I'm paying attention even when there's nothing to gain. Now, let's make this even easier to spot, because sometimes men miss it for a simple reason. It looks normal, but normal is where real attachment lives. Watch for the unprompted return. You said something once. They bring it back without you leading them. You mentioned you had a big meeting coming up. Days later, they ask how it went. You said your mother's health has been on your mind. Later, they check in, gently, not like an interrogation, like they actually care. You joked about wanting to visit one specific place someday. Months later, they send you something related to it, not as a hint, but as a quiet, thoughtful nod. That is the mind holding space for you. That is someone making room for you in their mental home. Another giveaway is how they remember the soft parts, not just the surface facts. Anyone can remember you like steak or that you drive a certain truck. But when someone remembers that you don't like crowded rooms when you're already stressed, or that you get restless when you feel stuck, or that you hate being rushed in the morning, that's different. That's them learning your emotional weather, not just your biography. And yes, this overlaps with female psychology in a way that can surprise men because many women are trained by life to track nuance, tone, timing, mood shifts, the unsaid thing behind the said thing. That doesn't mean every woman does it. It means when you see it done consistently, it's rarely random. It often signals attachment growing roots. The brain, especially when affection is involved, starts collecting you data like it's preparing for a long trip. What comforts you? What irritates you? What makes you feel respected? What makes you shut down? What helps you open up? Don't dismiss that. Don't laugh it off as she's just observant. Be honest. If someone is storing you like that, you've landed somewhere meaningful in their inner world. And here's the profound part, dressed in a friendly suit. Memory is love's quiet labor. It's not the fireworks. It's the wiring behind the walls that keeps the lights on. When someone is deeply attached, their brain keeps asking one simple question, often without words. How do I stay connected to him? The answer shows up as small acts of mental devotion. Remembering. Not because they're trying to own you, not because they're trying to control you, but because your presence feels emotionally relevant, like you've become part of their sense of closeness. That is exactly why these psychology tricks can feel almost magical from the outside. You think, how did they know? They didn't know like a detective. They learned like a person who cares. They remembered because you mattered. Now, let's add a little edge, witty but real. If someone remembers your smallest details, they're either attached or they're running for office. And unless you're handing out campaign buttons at dinner, assume it's attachment. Still, you must use your judgment. Memory alone isn't the whole story. A person can remember details and still be inconsistent in action. So don't let sweet remembering distract you from patterns of respect. Be clear. The point is not to get hypnotized by attention. The point is to recognize a strong signal when it appears alongside steady behavior. The most attractive kind of care is the kind that doesn't perform. It just shows up. If they remember your details and their actions match, if they follow through, if they treat you with warmth, if they make space for you, then you're seeing something solid. And if you're wondering what this has to do with how to fall in love, it's simple. Love doesn't start with a speech. It starts with significance. You can't fall into love with someone who treats you like background noise. You fall into love when you feel seen, when you feel registered, when you feel remembered. That is one of the most underrated gateways in how to fall in love. The moment you realize, I'm not just company to them, I'm important to them. That's also why people chase being understood more than being praised. Praise can be cheap. Understanding takes attention. And attention, when it sticks over time, becomes attachment. So don't shrug this sign off. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Be observant. Be grounded. Let it warm you without blinding you. Because when someone remembers the smallest details about you, your preferences, your stories, your patterns, your quiet moods, they're not just collecting trivia. They're building closeness brick by brick. And the next time you catch yourself thinking, how did they remember that? Don't rush past it. Sit with it. Smile a little. That is a mind-making room for you. That is attachment speaking without saying a word. And yes, if you're paying attention, you'll see it. Psychology tricks, female psychology, how to fall in love aren't just ideas on a screen. They're living signals in everyday moments, quietly telling you exactly where you stand. Sign 2. They feel your emotions without you explaining. There's a kind of connection that doesn't need words, and when it shows up, it feels almost unsettling in its accuracy. You don't say you're tired, they hear it in your voice. You don't say you're upset, they sense it in your silence. You don't say something is wrong, but they ask anyway, calmly, almost casually, like they already know the answer and are just inviting you to confirm it. That is not coincidence. That is not guessing. Psychology calls this emotional attunement, and it forms only when two nervous systems grow familiar with each other over time. Familiar, not forced. Comfortable, not rushed. This kind of awareness doesn't happen with curiosity alone. It happens with emotional attachment. When someone is attached, their brain starts tracking your emotional patterns automatically, the way a seasoned driver senses the road without looking at the dashboard. They notice when your laughter sounds different, when it lands flatter than usual. They notice when your energy feels heavier, like you're carrying something you didn't ask for. They notice when your replies shorten, when your pauses stretch longer than normal. Often they notice before you do, because attachment sharpens perception. It tunes the senses. It turns background noise into signal. Be clear about this. Someone who is merely interested listens to your words. Someone who is attached listens to your emotional signals. That is the line. Interest asks questions. Attachment reads the room. Interest waits for explanations. Attachment feels the shift. Don't underestimate how rare that is, especially in a world where most people are distracted, rushed, and half present. When someone feels your sadness, it affects them. When your anxiety rises, it unsettles them. When your happiness shows up, it lifts them. Your emotions no longer stay neatly contained inside you. They ripple outward and land on someone else's nervous system. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because your emotional state matters to them, not as a task, not as a performance, but as something their body responds to. And no, this isn't something people can fake for long. You can fake interest. You can fake charm. You cannot fake emotional resonance over time. The body knows. The nervous system knows. For a man between 35 and 70, this sign often hits differently because you've lived enough life to know how uncommon it is to be truly felt. You've been in rooms where no one noticed you were drained. You've had conversations where your words were heard, but your state was missed entirely. So when someone senses your inner weather without you spelling it out, it stands out. Don't brush it off. Don't joke it away. Be present with it. This is especially important if you see yourself as a high-value man, because emotional attunement doesn't diminish your strength, it complements it. A high-value man doesn't need to explain himself constantly. He doesn't need to announce every feeling. He values connection that is intuitive, calm, and grounded. When someone picks up on your shifts without pressure, without interrogation, without drama, that is alignment, not intrusion. This is also where masculine energy comes into play in a way that's often misunderstood. Masculine energy is not about emotional distance, it's about emotional steadiness. When you carry yourself with steadiness, people who are attached learn your rhythms more clearly. They sense when something is off because off is rare. They notice when your tone changes because your baseline is consistent. That contrast makes emotional attunement easier, sharper, more precise. And here's the quiet truth many men overlook. When someone feels emotionally connected to you at this level, you naturally attract women who value depth over noise. You don't need to perform. You don't need to chase. Your presence does the work. This is one of the least discussed ways to attract women, by being emotionally legible to the right person and emotionally meaningful enough that your shifts register. Don't confuse this sign with mind reading or control. That's not what it is. Emotional attunement doesn't invade, it doesn't demand. It notices and waits. It asks gently, "Are you okay?" Not to fix you, not to analyze you, just to be near you. That is the difference. Be careful not to shut this down out of habit. Many men were taught to keep things contained, to power through, to handle it alone. That skill has its place. But when someone senses your internal state without forcing you to open up, they're not trying to take your independence. They're offering companionship. You must learn to recognize the difference. Notice how this kind of person doesn't overreact. They don't panic when you're quiet. They don't accuse. They don't dramatize. They simply adjust. They soften their tone. They give you space or closeness depending on what you seem to need. That adaptability is a signature of attachment. It says, "I'm tuned in," and tuning in takes time. It takes repetition. It takes care, which is why this sign carries weight. It's not built in a week. It's built in shared moments, shared silence, shared emotional weather. If you are aiming to live as a high-value man, pay attention to how people respond to your inner state, not just your outer actions. Pay attention to who senses you versus who interrogates you. Pay attention to who adjusts naturally instead of demanding explanations. This awareness will sharpen your judgment and protect your energy. It will also help you attract women who resonate with your masculine energy instead of clashing with it. Emotional attunement creates safety, and safety creates attraction without force. That is how you attract women who want to stay, not just show up. So don't dismiss this sign as intuition or luck. Be precise. Emotional attunement is attachment made visible through feeling, not words. It's someone noticing the change in your laugh, someone feeling the weight in your silence, someone asking the right question at the right moment without pushing. That is real connection. That is someone's nervous system responding to yours. And when you see it, respect it. Don't rush it. Don't test it. Let it be what it is. Because when someone feels your emotions without you explaining, they're already closer to you than most people ever get. And that quietly says everything. If this hit home, don't just nod and scroll. Act, drop a comment right now and write, "The right people feel me without words." Like this video, subscribe for more sharp psychological insight, and remind yourself daily, real attachment doesn't ask for explanations. It feels the shift before you speak. Sign 3. They struggle when you pull away, even slightly. When a man understands attachment, he stops guessing and starts seeing clearly. And one of the clearest signs someone is deeply attached to you without saying it appears the moment you pull back just a little. Because you don't announce it, you don't explain, you don't create drama. You simply become quieter, slower, more contained. Your replies take longer, your energy shifts, your presence softens, and even though the outside world sees no change at all, they feel it immediately, sharply, instinctively, because attachment sensitivity is not logical, it is visceral, it lives below words, and psychology confirms what Old Stoic wisdom has taught for centuries. What stabilizes us becomes essential, and what becomes essential creates reaction when threatened. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when your presence has become part of their emotional rhythm, part of the mental pattern that keeps them steady, the absence of that rhythm feels like imbalance. So they don't necessarily confront you, they don't accuse, they don't demand. Instead, they adjust behavior in subtle, revealing ways. They ask more questions than usual. They check in under ordinary excuses. They linger in conversations. They look for reassurance without asking for it directly. Not because they want control, but because their inner system has learned that you are a point of emotional safety. And when that safety feels uncertain, the system reacts automatically. This is where men in modern life often misread the situation, thinking silence means indifference, thinking space means detachment. But the truth is the opposite, because people who are not attached adapt easily. They barely notice the change. They redirect their focus without friction. While attached people feel the shift instantly, deeply, because they are not just missing conversation, they are missing the feeling you give them, the calm, the clarity, the sense of grounding. And when that feeling wavers, they feel unsettled in ways they may not fully understand. Seneca warned, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Yet attachment is not imagination, it is pattern. And you have become part of that pattern, part of the structure that supports their emotional balance. And this is where iron mind thinking matters. Because a man with an iron mind does not panic at reactions. He observes them. He understands them. He uses insight instead of impulse. And this is how Stoicism win moments in real relationships, not by suppressing emotion, but by mastering interpretation. In today's world of constant notifications, fast responses, and emotional noise, subtle withdrawal stands out more than ever. Silence speaks louder than words. Delayed replies carry meaning. Reduced sharing sends signals. And someone deeply attached does not hear those signals as rejection, but as instability, prompting them to seek reconnection, not confrontation. Because attachment seeks restoration, not conflict. Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. And this applies here because if you understand the psychological mechanics, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. You recognize that their increased attention is not neediness, it is evidence. Evidence that your presence has weight. Evidence that you matter. Evidence that you have become part of their emotional infrastructure. And that knowledge gives you leverage, not for manipulation, but for clarity and leadership. Modern men are bombarded with advice to chase, withdraw, test, provoke. But old Stoic wisdom reminds us that strength is calm understanding, not games. And when you see someone respond to your quiet withdrawal with increased care, curiosity, and concern, you don't inflate your ego or retreat further out of fear. You remain centered, consistent, grounded, because consistency builds trust, and trust deepens attachment. And this is how Stoicism win in relationships, through steadiness, through predictability, through emotional regulation. Remember, attachment is not about constant closeness. It is about emotional reliability. And when someone senses that reliability slipping, even slightly, their nervous system reacts before their mind can rationalize it, which is why they feel unsettled without knowing why they reach out without a clear reason, why they try to reestablish the emotional signal they rely on. Nietzsche observed, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And for someone attached to you, the feeling you provide has become part of their why, their emotional anchor in a chaotic world. And when that anchor shifts, they seek to secure it again. This understanding is power, quiet power, the kind that builds an iron mind, the kind that allows you to move through relationships without confusion or fear, because you see patterns instead of guessing motives, and you respond with calm authority instead of emotional reaction. In practical terms, the advice is simple but demanding. Stay observant, not reactive. Stay steady, not distant. Recognize attachment when it shows itself subtly, and don't sabotage connection through misinterpretation, because men who master this psychological awareness master their interactions, their confidence grows, their communication sharpens, their relationships stabilize, and they move through life with the quiet certainty of someone who understands human nature deeply. This is old Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. This is how Stoicism win in emotional intelligence. This is how an iron mind reads silence, response, and behavior without confusion. And this is how you recognize when someone is deeply attached to you without them ever needing to say a word. Sign 4. They find reasons to stay connected. Sign 4 is the quiet one, the kind of signal most men overlook because it doesn't announce itself or knock on the door. It simply sits down beside you and waits, and that is exactly why it matters. This is the sign where someone finds reasons to stay connected without ever saying why. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice the pattern isn't loud pursuit, but steady presence. They don't chase you with dramatic messages or bold confessions. They don't declare feelings or demand attention. They just stay. They send a short message about something small, nothing urgent, nothing necessary. They share a post that made them smile and somehow made them think of you. They ask a question they absolutely could have Googled, but they didn't want an answer from the internet. They wanted an answer from you. Be clear about this. That is not accidental. That is intention wrapped in simplicity. Psychology calls this proximity-seeking behavior, one of the most reliable psychology tricks the human mind uses when attachment is forming, but words feel too risky. Instead of saying, "I miss you," they say, "This reminded me of you." Instead of admitting longing, they create moments. Don't underestimate that. In female psychology especially, connection often grows sideways, not straight on, through shared memories, gentle callbacks, and casual check-ins that keep emotional doors open without forcing anyone to walk through them too soon. They bring up something from the past, a moment you shared, a laugh, a small detail you forgot, but they remembered. And memory is not random. Memory follows meaning. Be honest with yourself here. People do not repeatedly think of someone who doesn't matter emotionally. They don't circle back again and again unless the connection gives them something real, something grounding, something warm. They choose presence without confession, They choose consistency over drama. They stay in your orbit, not hovering, not clinging, just close enough to be felt. Don't confuse silence with absence. Silence can be a strategy. And in How to Fall in Love, subtlety often outperforms force. They don't disappear for long stretches. They don't let days turn into weeks without some form of contact. They don't allow the thread to snap. That is deliberate. That is care expressed through repetition. Repetition is attachment. The brain bonds through repeated exposure, repeated emotional safety, repeated moments of being seen, and this is one of the most understated psychology tricks in human connection. Be aware of the rhythm. It's not about intensity, it's about return. They come back, again and again, not because they have to, but because something inside them pulls them back toward you. Don't dismiss that pull. Don't rush to label it either. Let it show itself. When someone keeps choosing you in small, ordinary ways, they are telling you something important without risking rejection. This is especially common in female psychology, where emotional investment often grows before verbal certainty, and staying connected becomes a way to test safety, trust, and emotional resonance. Be present enough to notice it. Be grounded enough not to chase what is already moving towards you. That is how to fall in love without forcing it, by recognizing the quiet signals instead of waiting for a grand speech. They don't let the connection fade because letting it fade would feel like a loss, even if they never say that out loud. And you must understand this clearly. Attachment doesn't always announce itself with passion or promises. Sometimes it simply shows up, gently, consistently, asking small questions, sharing small moments, keeping a small light on so the connection never goes dark. That is not coincidence. That is choice. That is emotional investment expressed in the safest language the heart knows how to speak. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs clarity, and subscribe for more insights on connection, psychology, and emotional intelligence. Your support helps this channel grow and reach men who value depth over noise. Now, I want you to anchor this truth for yourself. Comment the affirmation below to lock it in, to remind yourself that quiet consistency is not accidental, and that real attachment shows up through presence, not performance. Comment to remember, I recognize quiet loyalty, and I am worthy of consistent connection. Sign 5, they protect you quietly. Sign 5 is the one most men feel before they ever understand it. Because attachment doesn't always shout, sometimes it lowers its voice and proves itself through action. Attachment doesn't always shout. That line matters. Read it again. Real connection often shows up quietly, not through speeches or promises, but through care that feels natural, almost automatic. They notice when something's off before you say a word. Your tone changes, your energy dips, your replies shorten, and they feel it. Don't brush that aside. That is awareness driven by emotional investment, not curiosity. They check in on tough days without making a scene. No drama, no spotlight, just a simple, "Are you okay?" or "I was thinking about you." Be clear about this. People don't monitor your emotional weather unless you matter to them internally. They step in without being asked, not to be seen, not to impress, not to score points. That is important. This is not performance. This is subconscious care. Psychology explains this as emotional bonding, where your safety and comfort slowly become tied to their emotional state. That is not something people choose logically. It happens beneath awareness. When you're uncomfortable, they feel it. When you're stressed, it unsettles them. When you're threatened, even subtly, they feel compelled to act. That instinct is ancient. It is protective but not loud. It is alert but not controlling. And you must understand this difference if you want to move like a high-value man who sees reality clearly instead of chasing noise. Quiet protection doesn't look heroic. It looks consistent. It looks like checking details others overlook. It looks like standing slightly closer in uncomfortable situations. It looks like adjusting plans to make things easier for you without announcing the sacrifice. Don't expect fireworks here. Expect steadiness. That is where deep attachment lives. This is especially important for men who want to attract women while staying grounded in masculine energy. Because true attraction isn't built on constant pursuit, it's built on emotional safety and calm strength. When someone protects you quietly, they are investing emotionally without asking for reassurance in return. That is rare. That is meaningful. That is not coincidence. Be present enough to recognize it. Be calm enough not to test it. Testing quiet care often breaks it. Psychology tells us that once emotional bonding forms, another person's well-being starts to register as personal responsibility, not obligation. Responsibility. There's a difference. Obligation feels heavy. Responsibility feels natural. That's why they don't announce what they're doing. They don't say, "Look what I did for you." They just do it. That is attachment in its most honest form. And here's where many men get it wrong. They assume love must be loud to be real. Don't make that mistake. Loud affection can be shallow. Quiet care is costly. It requires attention. It requires consistency. It requires emotional presence, even when no reward is guaranteed. That is the kind of energy that aligns with masculine energy at its healthiest: calm, steady, grounded, observant, not reactive, not needy, not performative. When someone feels unsettled by your discomfort, it means your emotional state has crossed into their internal world. That doesn't happen casually. That doesn't happen quickly. It happens through repeated connection, shared trust, and emotional familiarity. Repetition builds attachment. The nervous system learns safety through consistency, and once that happens, protection becomes instinctive. You don't have to ask for it. You don't have to demand it. It shows up on its own. That is why this sign is so powerful. It reveals depth without words, and words can lie. Behavior rarely does. As a high-value man, you must learn to respect this kind of care, not exploit it. Don't take it for granted. Don't confuse it with obligation. Don't dismiss it because it doesn't inflate your ego. Quiet protection is not about admiration. It's about connection. And connection is what allows you to attract women who are emotionally mature, grounded, and capable of real partnership. Masculine energy isn't about forcing presence. It's about creating safety without effort. When someone mirrors that back to you through quiet vigilance, it's a sign the bond is real. Notice how they react when you're under pressure. Notice if they adjust without being told. Notice if they feel your tension before you explain it. That is not mind reading. That is attunement. And attunement is one of the strongest markers of emotional attachment psychology has ever identified. It means your emotional signals matter to them. It means your well-being affects their internal balance. That is deep. That is rare. And that is something you must handle with care. Don't chase reassurance when you already have proof. Don't demand explanations for instincts that haven't reached language yet. Be steady. Be observant. Be respectful of quiet devotion. This is how to attract women without games. This is how to stay rooted in masculine energy without posturing. This is how a high-value man recognizes real attachment without needing it to be announced. Because the strongest bonds don't shout, they protect, silently, consistently, and without asking for applause. Sign 6. They subtly mirror your habits, words, or energy without realizing it. Sign 6 is one of the clearest tells, and it separates surface interest from real attachment with surgical precision. They begin to mirror you quietly, naturally, without effort or awareness. Because when a man or woman is deeply connected to you, the nervous system doesn't ask for permission. It synchronizes. Suddenly, your words start coming out of their mouth. Your humor shows up in their timing. Your pace becomes their pace. Your energy becomes the temperature of the room. This is not imitation for approval. It is alignment born from safety. The brain only mirrors what it trusts, only echoes what it wants to stay close to. Psychology confirms this again and again. Mirroring is the unconscious language of bonding, the silent confession of attachment, the body saying what the mouth refuses to risk: I am with you. In modern life, where people are guarded, distracted, and trained to hide emotion behind screens and schedules, this signal becomes even more powerful. It bypasses performance and goes straight to instinct. As Marcus Aurelius taught through Old Stoic wisdom, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, meaning proximity reshapes identity whether we intend it or not. So when someone starts to think like you, move like you, speak like you, it's because you've already crossed the deepest gate. This is where men between 35 and 70 must sharpen their perception. Attachment at this level is not loud. It is disciplined. It is subtle. It is efficient. It respects strength, not noise. This is where Old Stoic wisdom meets modern psychology. True connection is not chased. It is felt. It settles in. It stabilizes. It mirrors. You don't need to test it or question it. You observe it. You recognize it. You stay centered. You maintain your iron mind, because mirroring increases when you are grounded, not needy, calm, not reactive, consistent, not performative. This is why Stoicism win moments are often invisible to the untrained eye. The man who understands human nature does not look for validation. He looks for alignment. Alignment always reveals itself through behavior, not promises. As William James said, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated, and mirroring is appreciation expressed through action, not words. Here is the instruction you must take seriously. Do not call it out. Do not tease it. Do not overanalyze it. Once you shine a spotlight on unconscious bonding, it retreats. Instead, remain steady. Remain yourself. Let the mirror become clearer. The more stable you are, the stronger the reflection becomes. This is how you master life, not by forcing outcomes, but by becoming the reference point others naturally calibrate to. In a world full of chaos, the man with an iron mind becomes the axis others orbit. This is not theory. This is observable reality. You've seen it in leadership, in long marriages, in loyal friendships. The strongest bonds form around the calmest presence. That is why Old Stoic wisdom still outperforms modern noise. Stoicism win strategies focus on inner order first, outer results second. When you live this way, attachment comes to you disguised as familiarity, as shared rhythms, as echoed phrases. Here is the final truth you carry forward. Mirroring is not coincidence. It is not flattery. It is not chance. It is the nervous system choosing you. When you recognize it without clinging to it, you hold the advantage. You keep your iron mind intact. You let connection deepen on its own terms. That is how you win quietly, decisively, repeatedly, because mastery is not announced. It is reflected. Those who understand this live better, lead better, and move through modern life with certainty, restraint, and calm authority. Exactly as Old Stoic wisdom intended. Exactly how Stoicism win moments are built. Exactly how an iron mind is forged. 6 signs someone is deeply attached to you without saying it. Psychology tricks. Love doesn't need to speak loudly. It only needs to stay. There's a form of attachment that never asks for attention. No grand declarations, no late-night confessions, no words demanding to be heard. Instead, it lives in behavior. It's the person who somehow never disappears from your orbit. They don't chase, but they're always there. They don't intrude, yet their presence is constant. Even when nothing is said, you feel them. You notice it in subtle ways. They remember details you forgot you shared. They sense your mood before you explain it. And when you distance yourself, they don't get angry. They quietly change, as if something essential has shifted. Psychology tells us something important here. Deep emotional attachment rarely announces itself. It reveals itself through consistency, awareness, and restraint. The truth is, when someone is deeply attached to you, they don't need words to hold on. They've already invested emotionally long before you realized it mattered. And once you see these signs, you understand something both unsettling and beautiful. You weren't just noticed. You were chosen silently, patiently, and deeply.